Awesome. Good afternoon, Wade.
How are you doing?
Awesome. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you and great to be on here today.
I'm excited to have you today on Michelle's Conversations That Matter. Thank you so much for saying yes to joining me.
Yeah, absolutely. I enjoy it.
Awesome. And I had a great time doing your podcast a few weeks ago. It was such a good conversation. And I was thrilled that we could have another chat about obviously something that's very important to both of us that we're really passionate about. So, So for people who don't know a little bit about my series, Michelle's Conversations That Matter, is I'm out to really elevate the conversation about mental health, emotional and mental well-being, and have people have a better understanding of mental health through experts talking about diagnosis, clinicians, to average people who are telling their story courageously and really sharing the hope that it is possible to live with a mental illness and to thrive. So I'm thrilled that you're here. What I do professionally is I get to work similar to you. I get to work with organizations to really help them improve their culture and recenter their employees so that they are fully engaged in their lives and also in their work. So that's just a little bit about me. And so I would love for you, Wade, just to introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about who you are, where you live, and what you do for a living.
Absolutely. So I live in Phoenix, Arizona. So we're enjoying another great Arizona summer. And I've been here about 13 or 14 years, originally from the East Coast. And I spent, give or take 20 years, a 20-year career in the human resources field. So, just dealing with a lot of the kind of issues that we're going to talk about today. I was an HR leader. I was a C-level executive. And about 6 years ago, I had the opportunity to jump off the corporate bus and really go to business for myself. I was able to get out there and just really reach more people and help more people, which is really exciting for me. And really what I do today is I work with people and organizations to reach their potential and to win, however they might define winning. And that's really my passion and what excites me and what gets me up in the morning.
I love that. I love that. What it takes to win. It's unique to everyone, right? What winning looks like.
That's right. That's right. And it should be unique to everybody.
Yeah. It's not one size fits all. You are also a published author. We share the same title of, we get to have the title of author. So tell us a little bit about your book you wrote, From the Heart.
Yeah, I released the book last fall. And From the Heart is a book about achieving epic results by incorporating compassion and empathy into your business. So something that we don't always think about. Mm-hmm. And really how that came about, I was sitting in a swimming pool last year in the middle of COVID. We had COVID all around us. We had riots going on. We had wildfires. We had just a lot of stuff going on. And as I was sitting in the pool that day, I was really just kind of going through gratitudes and thinking, what I am grateful for. And one of the things that popped in my mind was my career. It was the opportunity and all the people that I helped and, the opportunities I was given by that. My career trajectory was really sharp. I ran the HR function for a manufacturing division in my 20s. I was a CHRO in my 30s. I was able to start my own business in my early 40s. And so, I was just really grateful for that. But then I took it to that next step and asked myself the question, why? Why did that happen? And my first answer was, I had a really great team. And throughout my career, I lost one person left me of their own accord. And, and so I always had a great team. And so I asked myself, why was that? And I think it was because I treated people right. I really took care of the people. I had a personal interest in them. And that was really first and foremost in my mind. And taking that a step further, it popped in my head that it really was about compassion and empathy, both. And that was really at the core of my leadership process. So then I was like, why am I not teaching this in a more public way? Yeah. And so that was where two things came about. First of all, I had the opportunity to speak last September and I didn't have a topic yet. And so there goes. There was my topic. Mm-hmm. And secondly, I was like, well, I ought to give them a book too. And so that was the genesis of writing the book. The book really came together in less than 3 months, which I have another book I've been working on for over 6 years. Mm-hmm. And I'm still on the table of contents. But this was such, a passionate area for me that just rolled off. And so, so the book, I was just able to really incorporate a lot of the stories that I've experienced in career and then just build a framework around it. And there we go.
That's amazing. And that's the topic we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about empathy and compassion, but from the lens of it being a competitive advantage. And I don't think a lot of organizations think about empathy and compassion as being a competitive advantage. But like you said, people don't leave environments where they feel cared for and they feel like their leader does have their back. So let's dive into that topic of having it be a competitive advantage. And I have always believed that it's really about how you treat people that is what is paramount when it comes to leadership. But some people might be skeptical and say work is work, leave that stuff behind. Let's just we got to focus on deliverables. We got to get it done. And then, when I think about being extended empathy and compassion, I have those leaders in my mind who immediately come to mind with like the ones that really did good by me, that were really concerned about me, that were genuinely wanting me to thrive and therefore checking in on me. And then I have the opposite side of the coin. Like when I was diagnosed with depression myself, I was the one who was like, I'm going to lead by example and talk about this. And I remember having a leader that was less than compassionate. And so she painted my perception of the organization, even though it was so skewed, like that is not the company. That was my daily interaction. So how she treated me and how I felt by her affected me and my whole disposition about my job and my company. Tell us why you feel that empathy and compassion can be a distinct advantage.
It's really interesting. I'm gonna react to a couple of things you said first. Mm-hmm. One is the stories you have, right? You remember who those leaders were that really took care of you, and you remember those leaders that were not compassionate. And that was a big learning for me. Throughout the writing of the book, I had so many people come to me with their stories and talk about how, wow, that really is the nail on the head. I had all these terrible managers and they remember that. And it has such a negative taste in their mouth. And I had one that offered to write a whole chapter for me on one of the experiences with a manager that we both knew.
Yeah.
So people remember, and that's an important thing for any leader to keep in their mind is, it's not about today, it's about the future as well. Another thing I want to jump on too, and, just really briefly before I dive into this, competitive advantage thing is, work is work. Well, that is true. I agree with that 100%. Work is work until you ask people to do it. And then once you get people involved, it changes that whole dynamic. And, in most cases, people are involved in the work. And so, a lot of times, people think of compassion, empathy about, being nice, being good to people for the sake of society and things like that. And that's great. But, the real reason that I go after this compassion, empathy thing and the angle that I teach it is because it works.
Right.
It's this wonderful thing that the right thing to do actually works.
Yes.
And so, there's a lot of reasons that it works, right? And really, you talk about competitive advantage. Competitive advantage comes from people. Maybe you have this process that's like so far ahead of everybody, and that's a competitive advantage. But by the way, you got that through people, right?
Right.
And it's those people that are going to sustain it because eventually somebody's going to copy it. So competitive advantage is from people. And, there is no work person and home person dichotomy. That's what we're all taught.
Yep.
Leave work at work, home at home. Mm-hmm. But come on, everybody that's listening to this or watching this knows that that's just not true.
Right.
Because we all bring our cell phones home.
Yeah.
I would challenge anybody to tell me that they don't check their email at 7:00 at night. And then by the same token, you bring your cell phone to work and you're going to check, your text messages. A lot of people are going to check their Facebook even. And so this idea that we can split ourselves into two is just not consistent with neuroscience or psychology at all. And so it's really important to understand that there's this whole person. So with that backdrop, the question is what can an organization do to help the whole person be more effective? And that's where the compassion empathy comes in. that's where you start getting competitive advantage.
Right.
You see it with what you said, attraction. You're going to get the best talent. You're going to keep them. You're going to engage them. That's the stuff we think about off the top of our head, right? But another thing is innovation. When you have compassion, empathy, you create this safe space where people can try things and experiment. And that's really where you get the innovation that leapfrogs companies ahead of everybody else.
Right.
Also helps with collaboration and teamwork. Again, when people are showing compassion, empathy to each other, they're not threatened. They're more likely to open themselves up. They're more likely to go for change. So companies that adapt this, they're going to be more nimble. And then, and one thing that, I tend to talk in terms of leadership and employees, but what happens when you bring compassion, empathy into customer relations?
Wow.
When you show that compassion to the customer, it's really powerful, and you see it. You get such loyalty out of your customers. So that's really where the competitive advantage comes in with compassion and empathy.
That's amazing. I totally agree with you. And I think about how I felt when I was cared for and how I wanted to do like 150%. I was being asked this and I was like, well, how could I do it even better? You get to this point where you're like, okay, I'm really like, they really have my back. They really care. And I want to show that gratitude and outperform and really deliver. And I think you're so right when it comes to thinking about innovation. And if you want your people to thrive and therefore produce and therefore, meet your bottom line, your goals, your KPIs, whatever they are, you definitely, you don't realize how that plays into them outperforming and performing well.
Yeah, it really does, but we've seen it, right?
Yeah.
We've all seen that leader that just gets so much more out of their people.
Yeah.
And it's really all about dissecting. What are they doing?
Right.
Is it because they're yelling louder than everybody else?
Right.
Or is it because they're all over it? Is it the old school military football coach kind of approach? Not usually. In fact, it's really interesting. I was just reading an article the other day that sports coaches are now stepping back away from that model. And there's a show, I haven't seen it because it's I think it's on Apple TV. I don't have, but Ted Lasso, which is really about a coach that is really adapting these kind of approaches.
Wow.
So it's on my list of things to watch.
That's interesting. It's so interesting. So in your business, tell us what you've observed with your clients, especially now coming out of the pandemic, and how are you supporting them or advising them in this whole unique environment we're working in, part work from home, part face-to-face, the conversations around going back to work. How do you preserve a culture? What are you seeing?
The biggest thing that I see right now, and it's universal across all my clients, is busy. I mean, one word is they are busy. Yeah. This emerging world is challenging. It's very challenging. Mm-hmm. You got supply chain issues out there. You got labor issues. You have the big resignation that everybody's talking about. A lot of uncertainty and high stress, everybody's just really stressed out. And on top of that, we're trying to figure out this whole come back to work. And I do see more companies, going that direction, coming back, going back to work, whether it's now or a lot of them are waiting for after Labor Day when kids are back in school and things like that.
Sure.
But that's happening, and so, I hear stories about people they're going to their desk for the first time in 15 months, and stacks of papers there. And one of the stories I love is the guy came back and saw the stacks of paper and says, "Well, none of this is going to be important. Threw it all away."
It's so true, right?
I was like, "Yeah, I want to do that." And
it's amazing.
But the thing is, the leaders have to acknowledge this, right? Acknowledge this. They have the stress because they're dealing with all these issues, but their people are too. And this is the time where having that empathy and understanding what they're going through, and then having the compassion to be there for them, to help them, because what you need now more than anything is innovation,
right?
And adaptability, because every day is a different challenge, especially for industries that rely on material goods.
Right.
Supply chains are a mess.
Right.
So
how do leaders do that? How do leaders who are typically, driven by objectives and deliverables, how do they start to become more empathetic and compassionate in the workplace if they're recognizing, I definitely need to do that? What are some things that you would recommend?
That's a hard one because the leader is really busy figuring all these things out themselves.
It's true.
But what I tend to see is, you got a leader that's got 12 people underneath them, and this is a true life story. Every time I talk to him, it's, I had to go figure out how to get this material. I had to go get in a truck and drive and get this. And I said, so what are your people doing? He says, well, I said, well, they're struggling too, but they can help you. And if you engage with them and if you show the problems that you have to them, you're going to get that back. And as a team, you're really going to, be able to solve these a lot better than if each of you is going individually. Right. And so, to actually make that into something that works, that, is practical takeaway is step back, take that time and, what is going on and how can I, A, help my people, but B, how can I help me?
Yeah.
Because it really is a two-way street.
Powerful. Yeah, that's really important. I know, it's one of those things too. I know that the leaders who I've worked for who had a little bit more self-awareness around their own, around their own capacity and their own emotional intelligence, their own well-being, all of that. If they were a little bit more aware, I felt like I could connect with them because they weren't all facade. Let's face it, we've worked for the guy or the girl who puts on a really good exterior and you see them as someone who is very accomplished, but you can't get through that suit of armor, so to speak. And so it makes it hard to have that relatedness with them. So I always remember those leaders who were, a little bit more connected to themselves being definitely easier for me to connect with.
Yeah, that's so true. It starts with yourself and your own self-awareness and being vulnerable. When you're able to have that vulnerability and be open and transparent with your people, that sends a huge message, and that's really the beginning. But again, that's something that we've all been taught not to do.
Right.
We've been taught leaders have to be strong. We have to be powerful. We can't have concerns. We have to keep our emotions to ourselves, all those kind of things. And the reality is the really strong leaders, the really effective leaders don't do that.
Right.
They do it a whole different way. And, this isn't really new. You can go back in time and see some of the historical figures that, really were vulnerable and they showed compassion as well. And they accomplished really great things.
I want to go back to what you said earlier about having that you're committed to having your clients win, and win is unique to everybody's own definition, right? But the thing that I always think about is having the right person in the right seat so they can thrive and they can do a good job. I will never forget one of my favorite bosses about 2 months into the job actually asked me if I was happy. Are you happy doing the work that you're doing? And I was like, who are you? What do you mean, am I happy? You hired me to do this job. Does it matter if I'm happy? But it mattered to him. It truly mattered to him. And I will never forget that. He was genuinely concerned that I was the right person in the right seat. I think because he understood that if you have the right person in the right seat, you're going to have a better success in overall, results. Right? Do you agree?
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And part of compassion is really helping them with that.
Yeah.
And, so it is, are you happy? And maybe you go a little bit deeper than that. Why are you happy? Because, who's going to sit there and say, I'm unhappy, right? Some will, but I don't know if I would rely on that. But really getting into it and understanding that and looking at their performance. Right. People that are happy in their roles generally perform better than ones that aren't.
Absolutely.
And it's one of those things that when people think of compassion, they don't think about, the possibility that you have to let somebody go.
Right.
They think that's not compassionate when it actually is. One of the most compassionate things you can do is help somebody get in the right seat. And sometimes it's not the seat they're sitting in. Now that seat might be somewhere else in your group or somewhere else in your organization, but it might not. But the reality is if they continue to be unhappy in that seat, it's just not good for them. And it's not good for you. And it's not good for the organization.
Right. But that's huge. That takes something, right? It takes something really to do that and to be that kind of leader. that is willing to do that. So talk to us a little bit about what can companies do? I think I asked you a little bit about this, but like, what is it that you would challenge organizations to do? I mean, we want them to obviously check in, but as a culture, as an organization, if you're a leader in a company, say you're at the executive level and you say, I want more empathy and compassion in my organization, what do you challenge your people leaders to do?
I wouldn't bang on a desk for starters, but but it does start at the top, like we said. Start with yourself. Are you being empathetic? Are you showing compassion? Are you being vulnerable, and things like that? So really, it starts at the top, and it doesn't have to be these like big grand pronouncements and huge rollouts with balloons and stuff like that. Start small. Little small, episodes of compassion, empathy, starts to build momentum.
Yeah.
Don't go after the whole culture at once. Get this little corner, work it, build up momentum, and then, start spreading the stories of that momentum.
Right.
Show it. And then as people see that, it's going to start getting their attention. An important part of it too is it starts at the top. It starts with the top person, but it really has to flow through your whole leadership.
Right.
And most people, unless they're sociopathic or something along those lines, have compassion, empathy naturally within them.
Right.
But they don't necessarily understand how to use it and how to leverage it and how to like show it, especially since we've been taught for years not to, right?
Right. Right. I think about, I had interviewed a CEO, Daryl Toll. We talked a little bit about the power that his story had within the culture of his company. He was very open about his anxiety, and that literally caused a ripple effect first in his executive leadership team, in the fact that they were all like, oh, wow, well, that's very courageous. Well, I suffer with this. And then they started to open up to each other. And then that cascaded throughout the organization, and more people he was finding were just opening up and reaching out to him, reaching out to his leadership team. So the power that executive leaders have to just tell their own story can cause a huge ripple effect. Do you agree?
I agree. Yeah, 100%. And then when you roll it down through your leadership and they start telling their own stories, because they have them, right?
Yes.
Everybody has a story, but you have to teach them that, right? You have to develop that capability in your leaders.
Right.
And but the power of the storytelling, and then what happens after that is it starts becoming part of the language.
Yeah.
And that's really, kind of a pivot point for any cultural change, but this one especially, is once it becomes part of the day-to-day, the language, what people are talking about. And you start hearing, those words that used to be forbidden, right? Like empathy or love or, whatever it might be. Those kind of things is you start getting a lot of momentum there.
I love that. I think about just the fundamental idea of us extending our humanness to one another. I think it's kind of interesting that we have to sort of retrain people on just being human and connecting and being a little bit vulnerable and supportive, but it can go so far to just be a little bit more human and care, right?
Yeah. And people see that, and like we said at the beginning, people remember that.
Yeah.
And and that gets really powerful. And another thing a company's got to look at, though, is they also have to look at what kind of behaviors and what kind of people they're going to reward.
Right.
So make sure that you're praising and recognizing and rewarding the behaviors you want to reward. Right. So often we get mixed up about that.
Right.
And we focus on maybe, the most sales or things like that, which is valid. But let's also focus, let's recognize the people that are doing these kind of things, that are showing that compassion and empathy, that humanness.
Yeah.
And once you do that, then your group really starts buying in, and then it becomes a matter of sustaining it. And so you have to build it into how you hire.
Sure.
Are you hiring people that are going to, understand this kind of culture? Because again, you're fighting with, decades of, learning that people had, that this isn't how you do it.
Right. So true. It's so true. And the modeling is important. Modeling and hiring and praising and rewarding for the courage to go first, because that's how you change a culture. Yeah. It's so cool. Yeah. It's all woven together. So what are you up to next? What's on the horizon for you? And how do people get in touch with you?
Yep, absolutely. First of all, the horizon's always pretty short these days, but yeah, what I do is, I offer coaching and workshops to help grow leaders. Mm-hmm. And what I do is I don't teach compassion and empathy as a subject matter, but everything I teach, whether it be accountability or performance management, influence, time and stress management, whatever it is, I incorporate the heart-based principles into that. And so I work that through the coaching and the workshops that I offer. But what I'm really excited about now is, one of the things that you run up against in this space is you can only reach so many people because you have a couple really big blockers. One is money and one is time. You either don't have the time for it or, they don't have the budget for it, right? And so I'm offering a new program, which I'm calling, the working name is Laser Focused Coaching. Nice. And it's really going to be unlimited 15-minute coaching sessions, for a year. And I'm going to be able to offer that at a price point of, under $1,000 for the year. And so it's a really low price point, but it's also 15-minute bites, which people can always work 15 minutes in their schedule.
Yeah.
If they don't think so, then they probably have deeper issues. But we may need to work on some of their time management. So I'm really excited about that because I think that can really expand the group of people that will start, really learning how to take compassion, empathy, and build a successful business and a successful career around that.
Awesome.
As far as how to connect with me, how to reach me, you can find me under LinkedIn under Wade Thomas, Business Impact Coach.
Yeah.
My website's at the bottom of the screen there.
Yeah.
You can go to my website, subscribe to my newsletter. I send out a lot of free stuff every week. And also you can find me on Instagram _Wade_Thomas. And I'm also in the process of launching a new YouTube channel. So check it out. It's Heart-Based Leadership by Aim to Win.
You're awesome. I love the work you're doing, Wade. It's so awesome. Thank you so much for being here. Any final words of wisdom that you want to leave with the audience today before we wrap up?
It's one thing I feel very strongly about, and, I alluded to earlier, and it's really kind of the words of wisdom I always leave on these kind of things. And that is, we is greater than me. So, trying to do things as a team is much more powerful than doing it yourself. In fact, as a little reminder, I have on a hat. So.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Wade. Thanks for giving me your time, something you cannot get back. I really appreciate your time today. Thanks for the great work you're doing in the world. And I'm fortunate to have met you, and I look forward to following your journey.
All right. Thanks. It's been a great time.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.